30 years ago. It needed to be reworked. You get agreement on solve it, you build confidence, you build experience, you build constituencies in that span borders.
The transition will be contested, messy, and far from inevitable.
It was worth the investment of time and effort to see what could be done.
What do you think is the most important issues? Before the 2003 Iraq War, INR, where you served, was the only U.S. intelligence agency that questioned Iraq's possession of weapons of mass destruction. And in 2007, the assessment report on Iran's nuclear program, which you led, pointed out that Tehran halted its nuclear weapon development efforts, and this evaluation helped avert war with Iran. So based on this past experience, how do you assess the current troubling situation in the Strait of Hormuz?
That on the 2003 Iraq weapons of mass destruction, INR, Bureau of Intelligence Research, my bureau, did not get it right. We got it less wrong than others did.
Less wrong?
Less wrong. There were parts that we were wrong too. That on the 2007 Iran, we were not going to war. There was a great concern fanned by the media, but the concern in the Congress that the Bush administration was going to attack Iran. It was not. But that estimate was important because it led to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that was adopted in the Obama administration. It cleared the way for that. Now, what those experiences have to say that's relevant to
the current
situation in Iran, I don't know what the president's thinking was. He has not given a clear statement of goals or a consistent statement of goals. I've seen no evidence that new things have been discovered about what Iran is doing that would justify the actions of Israel and the United States.
So there seems to be no new evidence as compared to the 2007.
No new evidence has been produced by the administration publicly or revealed by reporters talking to insiders.
In recent years, we have seen the United States repeatedly resorted to the unilateral sanction, the tariff weapon withdrawal from the international organizations, etc. So how do you understand the shift of the U.S. role in the international order?
The U.S.-led maintained global order for 8 decades. Because the United States played such a big role in that system, we arguably saw better than others that it was run out of gas, that 30 years ago. It needed to be reworked. Partly because of its success, restoring and increasing prosperity in Europe and in East Asia, the growth of the Asian tigers, that the demise of the Soviet Union that brought, give or take, 100 more countries that wanted to play in that system and didn't want changes to the system. Sorts of pressure to move beyond the agreements that were structured to avoid another Great Depression and avoid another world war. And they worked pretty well in that regard. The United States has become even more wealthy under the international regime that we built and led as our partners became wealthier. The country got much wealthier per capita numbers, but actual individual take-home pay didn't. That the American government did a poor job of handling the tax, the health, education, other expenditures in there, that ordinary people say, we're no longer benefiting from this system. Blaming the system was a political cop-out, an easier way to do it than saying, we screwed up. We've got to start taxing corporations more. We've got to put more into local level education than we were doing. So bad choices by the United States, but it was in the context of public support for the policies was eroding rapidly.
Many people feel that there seems to be no visible force capable of restraining the United States. And this feeling actually shaken people's confidence in viewing the current world in a positive way. So what's your take on this?
Polling shows there's very few in the United States that support the war on Iran. Every poll that's been taken since shows less and less and less support. Is way under 50% that support this war. That's a big deal. And American people, like people everywhere, they don't think geopolitically. They think pocketbook issues. They think, what do you talk about at the dinner table? That can we buy the kids new musical instruments, or it's going to cost more to send a daughter to graduate school than into very practical stuff. And they're not impressed that aggregate numbers for the United States go up, and the gap between us and pretty much everybody else gets wider and wider. That it ain't helping me. The sentiment is real. Blaming the system was a political cop-out, an easier way to do it than saying, we screwed up. That it was run out of gas, that 30 years ago. It needed to be reworked.
Do you think it reflects a real trend? Do you see this as a temporary stress test, or is it irreversible structural degeneration? Since 1980s, it has been widely understood in China that peace and development is the overarching theme of the entire world. But recently, people have perceived more and more intensification of confrontation. Recent years, we do see those multilateral mechanisms, the UN Security Council, the International Criminal Court, the World Trade Organization, they repeatedly fail in recent conflicts. So do you see this as a temporary stress test, or is it irreversible structural degeneration?
I don't think it's structural, but I think there's a very real need to rebuild the international order. And that's going to be extremely hard to do. It was relatively easy when we did it in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. Last man standing after the Second World War. That no country, no combination of countries came close to the overwhelming economic and military power of the United States with a nuclear monopoly. That had pretty clear ideas with the people at the time that what was necessary to prevent another Great Depression and another World War. Set about doing that. Now, there's 140 more countries. And we have an ethos of democratic participation that anything the international community does affects everybody in the international community. So everybody ought to have a voice in setting up the new institutions, the new rules, establishing norms. And you can say, how in the world are you going to do that? Getting agreement in the General Assembly that today is Friday is hard. moved away from using the United Nations, I think was a mistake. But if it's really important, why would you take it and you can't get it through?
So you do see the breakdown, the degeneration of the old multilateral system.
Pieces of it that work very well, agreements, the raft of arms control agreements, I think made the world safer. They're all gone now, and that's not good. Some we pulled out, others the Russians pulled out. Okay, if we do it again, how do you do it without the Brits and the French and the Chinese? And what about the North Koreans, the Indians, and the Pakistanis? And oh yeah, there's Israel. That's looking pretty hard to do.
The now 80-year-old international system has contributed to unprecedented peace and prosperity, but it is no longer capable of meeting 21st century challenges. We must, and we can, build a better system, but doing so will not be easy, and it will not be fast. The transition will be contested, messy, and far from inevitable.
So people lamented that the world is regressing to the law of the jungle. So from the perspective of intelligence analysis, which focus on early warning, so how do you see this view? Do you think is over anxiety, or do you think it reflects a real trend?
I think it reflects perverted thinking. That law of the jungle is a silly term. Right?
It's a silly term?
It's a silly term. That nobody envisions going back to law of the jungle, all against all, a Hobbesian world.
If you don't like the law of the jungle, if you don't like the word, economic interdependence has once to be considered as a powerful force to tame the law of jungle. It can be considered to keep the world in a balanced system because economic interdependence makes war too costly. But now, a lot of phenomena make people feel like economy itself was turned into a jungle weapon. Besides the economic interdependence, many people also put their hope for the world peace and development on cultural exchange and integration, on the use of the technology to bridge the gap between the rich and poor. But recent years, we also see those hopes to met with disappointment as well. So put all those complicated situations together, what do you see the way forward for this world?
Well, I think the way forward is nobody wants to go back. Hey, let's go back to the good old days of the 1930s. Oh, the halcyon days of the Cold War. That was terrific. I don't know anybody that wants to do that. Okay, you tackle problems one at a time. You decide, is this problem is so important, even though it's really hard, we have to tackle it, because without that, we can't do other. Or you take them where you can. You can get agreement and solve it. You build confidence. You build experience. You build constituencies that span borders. Part of it is the more links you have, the more mutual interests, the more pillars you have under the relationship, the easier it is to get through the times when you got a bad relationship with respect to some part of it, but you got all of these other things. Since the 1990s, almost the whole world was kind of open to engagement under whatever name you put on it. And that's not just economic, it's cultural, it's exchange of cuisines. That there's so much more of that going on now than even a decade ago. That I don't see that being abandoned. It'd be extremely hard to roll it back in most places. that because they didn't get into it for government policy. They got into it because they've got the same interest in sailboats that I do, or women's mental health, whatever it is. Let's work together. Let's talk about what we're doing. And most don't care about the politics of it, in my experience. It's not a bad idea because it came from China. It's just, what does it mean? What are the opportunity costs of doing this? How will you know if it's not working?
So you are thinking it in a more practical way.
To me, if you're not thinking in a practical way, why bother? I spent a lot of decades as an operator trying to actually do things, getting involved in doing things internationally. And it's not easy.
To prepare for and shape the future, we must focus as much on process as on desired or anticipated outcomes. The efficacy and character of the transition process will affect all nations and people, and are far too important to be left to chance.
Getting agreement in the General Assembly that today is Friday is hard, that nobody envisions going back to law of the jungle, all against all, a Hobbesian world.
The transition will be contested, messy, and far from inevitable.
Besides the United States and China, what's other forces of nations that we can look for? What do you think is the most important issues? You once said that the United States has no reason to attack China, and very few Americans believe that China would attack the United States, yet the relationship between China and the US is indeed facing challenges.
I think it's a lot of things coming together. The prospective gain going back into the 70s was so large, it was worth the investment of time and effort to see what could be done. The eagerness on the Chinese side to put some stuff in place fast made it possible to overcome objections that not so easy anymore. Also been around a long time. The relationship has been a lot worse than it is now. Most things, they're not that bad. It's lost opportunities, it's frustrations on both sides that don't really need to be there. Could be better, should be better, but it's not getting worse.
You once said that one of the most important value of intelligence work is to bring Beijing to the negotiating table. So against the current backdrop, what do you think is the most important issues?
Many times in many arenas in China, it's the nuclear stability. A second, to me, is basically a negative list of the things you can't invest in. So companies can make decisions on it. Mm-hmm. That the more publicity, what's happened in Chinese intellectual property courts, that you've now passed laws, you're now enforcing the laws. And foreigners have done all right, is my understanding on this. Nobody understands that except the company that won. And they're not saying, China's got a judicial system that we can use, we can work with it. To me, I'd put number 3, the constraints on people to people. This is stupid that we make it harder for people to communicate with one another, travel back and forth.
Okay, you just named 3 important topics that you think China and the US need to have real dialogue. And besides that, there is still some space for the 2 countries to cooperate, right? So for those that still have the space for cooperation between these two countries amid the current political climate? How do you think to promote practical cooperation?
Pick your spot on the globe, okay? I'll pick someplace in Africa. You're pouring money in. When you started, mine was good. This is not a competition. They're going to build a port. Let's build stuff that can use the port. They're going to build a road. Let's build stuff that can use the road. They're going to build a hospital. Let's train doctors and nurses. There's absolutely no reason for these to be viewed through the lenses of rivalry. Who comes up with a new pharmaceutical to address widespread disease in poor countries? Who cares? Ultimately, somebody will get a Nobel Prize and companies will make a lot of money or not make them. But the goal here is something so much more important than which pharmaceutical company has higher return. And do it cooperatively. Let the firms.
I can't agree more that the private part or the corporate part can play very important role in the current complex, the political climate. But I still want to ask my next question, that is, in the direction of preventing the world getting into the law of jungle, besides the United States and China, what's other forces of nations that we can look for?
I don't think any nation should be excluded. Every nation has problems, every nation has resources, every nation has opportunities. Clearing the way to let shorthand private actors find them and act on them.
I'm very curious that why your Chinese name is 冯稼时. Is there any story behind it?
Well, the only story is when I was second year Chinese at Cornell, my teacher decided to give me a Chinese name. Feng is close to
Fingar, your last name.
And I am from a very rural area on Long Island. And the Jia Shi is a good name for a farmer. Shi is Jia, it means to sow grain. So she said that's a good name for a farmer. You're from a rural area.
So how is your Chinese?
It once was good. It's not anymore because I don't use it. 20多年前比较流行，不是常常用的。因为这是我在国务院的时候，因为我的地位比较高，我随时都是用英语。
Wow, your Chinese is good.
哪里，不太难，真的太难。
人民币国际化的这个进程和步伐应该怎样呢？
Do you have any recommendations?
I don't think China should make the first move.
You think that is the right thing to do?
Doing the right thing doesn't mean that everything is going to work every year.
你不必成为一个经济学家，但是需要像一个经济学家一样来思考。
其实帮企业就是帮国家。
工业革命以来最大的一次迁移。
恐惧比利剑更伤人，信心比黄金更宝贵。
悲观者赢得当下，乐观者赢得未来。
把记录中国经济这件事情共同把它做好。